welcome back to
Cancer sucks.
Oh yeah, because cancer does suck.
But your life doesn't have to.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I am one of your hosts, Adrienne Finch, and with me, the lovely, the man of the hour, cancer warrior himself, Jay Williams.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for coming back. We've got a wonderful part 2 of our story on the way because we left you with that cliffhanger just in terms of how we got to where we are right now. So, Adrienne, let's talk about part 2.
Let's take it away.
So part 1, we talked about really the diagnosis that happened in the summer of 2023, what that was like, how it kind of impacted me and impacted my family especially. And then you sort of hit the bottom of that pit that you're falling into and you go, okay, now I got to put my warrior shield on. We got to get ready for the fight of our lives, because with cancer, there's no second place. There's no third place. There's only win and you're still here, lose and you're no longer with us. And so, I realized that very early on. And so that's really where this attitude came from, where I'm going to stay very positive. I'm going to really think about how I react to things that are out of my control. And boy, let me tell you, I had no idea what I was signing up for, when you start fighting cancer, because it likes to throw you so many left turns when you're heading right constantly. And it's a real challenge. And so when I got out of the hospital, they immediately got me in 3 weeks later for chemo. They would have gotten me in sooner, but they had to let those liver numbers get to a certain point because the chemo is so strong that they give you for pancreatic cancer. They really need your liver functioning to help filter out the bad stuff that they're actually putting into you. And look, here's what I will say about chemotherapy. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm very fortunate. I have an amazing healthcare team at City of Hope in Duarte, California, that I get to work with, and I'm so thankful for. And I have some doctors at MD Anderson in Phoenix, Arizona as well that have also helped me along this journey. But chemo still remains the best way to fight cancer at the moment. Now, everybody knows there's a price that comes with that, because chemo really is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because you're destroying good cells and bad cells. It's not really going, oh, that's a good cell, that one needs to stay. It's just shock and awe. Let's get rid of it all. But it is, in many ways, the option that you have before you have to look at alternative options. And so you kind of learn to accept that. So chemo for me in the beginning was very challenging. I was very lucky. They told me immediately I was going to lose my hair. That never happened. I went through 10 rounds of chemo initially. There's a 4 cocktail that they give you with pancreatic cancer. And the third one you actually take home in a pump with you. So if you can imagine, you got this little pump with you and people say to you like, oh, what's that thing you got there? And you're like, I'm getting chemo.
I had never heard of that kind until you got it.
Chemo to go.
Chemo to go,
I call it. It's just like a drive-through window.
It's the newest accessory.
I'll have a burger, some fries, and some chemo to go. That's
man, that should be a song.
What it was. Right?
That could definitely
chemo
be a song. Yeah.
In my case, I actually teach part-time at LMU as well. Obviously, Adrienne, you were one of my students. Parker, one of my students. But it was interesting because I actually had to teach while getting chemo, which was a crazy thing. And every 5 minutes, this thing goes, the chemo's going in.
That was great. Oh, man.
So it definitely took some getting used to. But that chemo was really tough. I ended up with neuropathy, which for those of you that don't know what neuropathy is, it affects your nerves in different ways. In my case, both my fingers and feet have gone numb. I have no feelings in my fingertips or feet. Don't know if I'll ever get those back. That's really tough to get used to. And I have a real sensitivity to colds. As if I needed another reason as to why I love living in Southern California. Here's another one. I really need to be here now with the weather.
Yeah.
As opposed to where I grew up in Indiana, where I don't think I could probably make it through a winter there now. So it is a little more challenging. And here's one thing I think that's very important for everyone that's going through whatever cancer journey you're going through, you need to become your own advocate. And by that, what I mean is these doctors are amazing, but these doctors are treating a lot of people. And, they don't know what they don't know. So if you've got a question or you're not sure about something, the onus is on you to ask that question. The onus is on you to do your research. When they tell you something, go home and look it up. Google and AI are wonderful things that way now. You can look it up, educate yourself. No one says you have to become a doctor or a surgeon, but educate yourself. It's your body, it's your life. It's certainly important and worth doing. But then you can have more educated conversations with your healthcare team when you're trying to find out things that are going on. Like, I don't understand why this is happening, or why does my CT scan say this number? And they can actually walk them through. Don't just automatically assume, well, the doctors have got it, because the reality is, I don't care how good the doctors is, they all don't have it because they've got a lot of patients that they're also dealing with. So become your own advocate. I realized that very quickly. And so
Agreed.
let's talk just briefly about this surgery. So the Whipple surgery, I thought a couple of things. First of all, I thought, wow, the Whipple, that's got to be really good cutting edge type surgery. That's probably some of the latest technology. And then I looked that up online and I'm like, 1932. Really? So the Whipple has been around since 1932. And
that's crazy.
This is a very involved surgery. Now, again, not knowing what I don't know, you go to the doctor and you go, I have these tumors. Cut them out, please. And the doctor goes, no. And you're like, well, you know I have the tumors. You know where the tumors are. Why won't you cut them out? And the reason is they've got to, first of all, try to shrink it as much as possible. They don't want to leave anything behind. It could be growing against an artery. It could be growing against an area where it could metastasize and spread to another area. There's a lot of reasons why they need to wait a certain amount of time. I did not know this. But I will tell you, the waiting part causes great anxiety. And I like to use this analogy, Alien, one of my favorite movies. We all know that amazing scene where the alien goes flying out of the guy's stomach. Well, imagine that alien is a tumorous cancer. And basically the doctor on the ship says, look, that alien is growing in your stomach. And you go, great, cut it out. And the doctor goes, yeah, no, I don't think so. We need to wait. We're going to let that alien keep growing for a little while we treat it inside.
It's
and
tough
then
while
we'll eventually get around to it, hopefully. And by the way, there's a good chance we may not even be able to cut it out at all. And you're like, what? So then I think to myself, Adrian, like, oh, well, that's great. Then fine, let's wait. Let's shrink it. Let's do what we got to do. So with the Whipple, you cut the tumor out. And they're like, yeah, but there's a little more to it than that. And I'm like, well, what is involved in it? And they're like, well, we essentially rewire your entire digestive system. And I'm like, excuse me?
That sounds awful.
I want to just chime in real quick. When was it? 1930? The first person?
Yes.
Now imagine that, being the first person with that, being told your entire digestive system is going to be rewired. I mean, Adrian, how would you react?
I don't know.
I mean,
if it was successful, I have no clue. You mean in 1932 or now?
Well, no, in 1932, it does feel like some of that old medicine we hear about, like, the bloodletting. Let's just drain all the blood and then you'll be better. It's like, really? So what they explained to me is they go in and they remove your gallbladder. They remove as far back of your pancreas as they can, which includes the tumors. They remove a section of your small intestines and part of your stomach, and then they reconnect everything. Now, the reason they do that is they want to make sure that cancer doesn't come back, or that if it had been growing close to, let's say, your gallbladder, it didn't spread to your gallbladder. So there's good reason why they do what they do, but it's a very extensive surgery. And so as again, I did my research said, find a doctor that has a lot of experience at this when you do this. And There are so many great surgeons out there at City of Hope that have done this surgery, so many great surgeons at various hospitals that do this surgery. So you got a lot of options. I mean, that's the good news. But I found Dr. Chody at MD Anderson in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just took a meeting with him really for a second opinion more than anything else. Because again, I think that's always just good to make sure everybody's all on the same page. And the good news is they were. But there was just something about him that just felt good to me when I met him. And I decided that I was going to have my surgery in Arizona as opposed to Southern California.
First of all, just want to say that what I think is so important to point out that I always use this analogy that I feel like when it comes to finding both doctors, medical doctors and therapists and psychologists, it's really like dating. Like as long as they're qualified and have the experience, then it comes down to like, who do you mesh with? Who do you vibe with? Who just makes you feel like taken care of and cared about? And I think that's really great that you found someone. It's so lucky because it doesn't always work out that way. And you just want to go into it feeling taken care of and feeling like you trust this person. And sometimes that is just a vibe or a gut feeling. So I'm glad you found that guy.
It's true. And that really should be for everyone, because just because a doctor, for instance, book smart wise, has all the degrees, doesn't mean that doctor could be a right fit for you. So you got to feel really comfortable with your healthcare team. That's very important. I feel very blessed, and I literally do what my healthcare team tells me because I trust them. And that trust is really important. If you don't trust them, you're always going to be trying to double guess them when it comes to things.
Definitely.
And that's just not a good way to be. And so I think that's a really good point, Adrian. My doctors, my healthcare team were wonderful. Even though City of Hope and MD Anderson are two different entities, they all work together to help me.
That's
which
great.
really meant a lot.
That's great. Because you're the most important in the story.
Yeah. And the doctors all knew each other, because that's the other thing. It's like any field. At the end of the day, the experts in this area, it's a relatively small group of people that really know where all the latest trends are going with this cancer, with any cancer really. And so I felt like I had the best of the best. So what I was also told, though, is I had to check in several times in Arizona, because they're like, look, just because your tumor's shrinking doesn't mean that you can still get this surgery. And there's a good chance we can cut you open and immediately realize there's cancer all over the place. And he's like, all I'm going to do is sew you back up and say there's nothing I can do for you. So you don't know any of this going in. This could be a very short operation or it could be a very long operation. The operation typically takes anywhere from about 7 to 10 hours, because it's a pretty extensive operation. And not only are they rewiring your digestive system, but then your brain has to figure out what's been rewired, because things now work a little differently than they've worked in your entire life. In my situation, my digestive system of, at that point, 57 years, suddenly was working differently. So new plumbing, you got to figure all of that out. And
let me stop you for 1 second.
Yes.
I need to interject. So let me get back onto the timeline that we're talking about, just to make sure we're all following. You get the diagnosis. You know pretty much right away, or relatively quickly. I mean, I know it was 3 days or so, that there's a tumor, it's pancreatic cancer, and when are you hearing about the fact that there's this procedure that exists? And then are they mentioning it right away, or are they immediately putting you on chemo and saying you need to wait until we could do this surgery? Or what was the timeline with when you knew about the surgery?
Oh, good question. So the timeline was, everything you just described happened between June and probably August. So I had already started chemo, and essentially about a month into chemo, they started talking to me about, okay, so here's our plan. So we're going to send you the 14 rounds of chemo. After that initial 14 rounds, we're going to evaluate where you are. Then we're going to send you to radiation, which was also something new, like a radiation, okay? And they said, and then if you qualify, you'll be able to get the surgery. Now, from what I was told, this is relatively newer. They used to do it the other way around. A lot of times they would do chemo, then surgery, then radiation. But the difficult thing, honestly, with all of this, Adrian, is each one of these things, chemo, radiation, they're taking your body down another notch. Like, I started out relatively healthy. So I
Right.
actually handled the chemo pretty well, but I was starting to get worn out towards the end of the chemo, going into radiation. But then your biggest fight is even ahead with the surgery, because you got to
Right.
be up for that surgery and the recovery that's involved with that. And so
Right.
that's the really tough part, is just getting yourself mentally prepared. And I would listen to different music and everything. It's just literally like, felt like I was, back in my days of playing football, before
Mhm.
I went out for the game, I listened to music to get ready to
Mental
go. I mean,
prep. Yeah.
it really was, it's like mentally I had to be in the right headspace to go do this. And
Mhm.
so what ended up happening, so I did radiation through about chemo through about November. And what happened then was the chemo initially shrank the tumor. It was great. It shrank actually a good bit, but then it stopped and it started to grow again. And it was explained to me that a lot of times these cells are very tricky when it relates to cancer, and they will start to mask themselves because they realize there's something trying to take them out. And so that initial round of chemo became ineffective at that point at 10. So I was short about 4 of what they had originally ordered, and they moved me immediately to radiation. And the radiation was each session was about 15 minutes. And I was doing that 3 days a week, and I was taking oral chemo on the days that I was actually getting the radiation. And that took place over the holidays. So I literally went through December and January with my radiation, and then it was 25 doses of radiation. And then I went up for my final trip to Phoenix in mid-January, and Dr. Chody greenlit me for the Whipple procedure.
Wow.
So I had to go through a lot, including
Yeah.
making sure that I physically could handle the surgery. And again, that's where age was a little bit on my side. Although he told me, he's like, we've got 80-year-olds that do this. I can only hope I have the stamina at 80 to go through something like that, because
Seriously.
it kicked me hard at, 57 at that point.
Yeah.
So I got ready. The Whipple procedure happened. For me, it was about a 10-hour procedure. Again, you go to sleep not knowing if they're going to be able to do it or not, but you wake up in a lot of pain. There's a lot that goes with it, including getting your bowels to work again. Your stomach has stopped, essentially. Your muscles that sort of work like this, and the brain tells them when to work. Well, when something like this happens, they've completely shut down. So nothing's working. And they chose the natural path to bring them back, which means everyone just has to wait. So I was on a liquid diet, and I literally did not have my bowels working for 14 days. I was getting so concerned. The doctors weren't concerned. I was concerned, but it took that long really for the body to sort of reset itself. And there's just so many things that go along with the Whipple procedure in terms of getting a new digestive system. You really can't eat as much. Just in general, I've never had an appetite since being diagnosed with this. So it's just trying to figure it out. There's more weight loss that comes with that. By the way, so at this point, I went from the 275 to about 220 to, when I went into surgery, I was 200. When I came out of the surgery and left the hospital, I was about 190. I'm now at 170. So I've lost about 100 pounds during this fight. So it gives you kind of an idea on how this sort of has rolled itself out. So have the surgery. I get to go home 2 weeks after the surgery. And at that point, you are considered cancer-free. However, in my case, right before I went in for the Whipple procedure, I had to have another prostate biopsy. And so literally the day I was finding out that I was cancer-free from pancreatic cancer, I got a call from my urologist that informed me I now had prostate cancer. So I'm like, really?
Wait, so you came out of the surgery though, and right away were you aware that it was, I mean, you talked about all these potential things that can happen, and right away did they say it went well, you're good, we did it? Or did they kind of have to wait until your bowels are working properly to see if
they
there's
had to wait to go
complications?
back in for a biopsy? They did have to make sure that there were no infections, because that was that's a very big concern, obviously, when they do any types of surgeries, around your digestive system and your bowels. Unfortunately, there wasn't for me. And, they were really happy with this. And then I delivered the news to them about my prostate, unfortunately. Now, look, here's what I will say on the prostate side. It was a lower PSA number. It's in the isolated area where the cancer is, but it is cancer. And so prostate cancer is treated differently than pancreatic cancer is treated. So far, I've been on what they call active surveillance. And that's about the best kind of cancer treatment you can get because they're just surveilling where the cancer is. So I get my PSAs checked on a regular basis. I get MRIs on a regular basis, and I get prostate biopsies on a regular basis. These become more and more complicated the more your immune system go down because there's a high risk of infection, especially with prostate biopsies, just given the location on how they have to do it. So I've had to be very careful with that. And so far, thank goodness, the prostate cancer has remained isolated in one area, but it could at any point take off, which would mean that I would have to get some type of treatment because the treatment for different cancers are different in each instance. And so what you do for prostate cancer, even though it may be called chemo, it's different drugs within chemo that's actually used in pancreatic cancer. So we're going to put a little asterisk by prostate cancer. We know it's there. It's not spreading. Dang. It's a slow growing cancer. We're thankful for that. So that's kind of over here. So back to, let's call it part 3. We should probably go to another break here, which means for you a chance to redeem yourself.
Yes, thank goodness.
I'm going to read this question very succinctly to make sure you understand.
No, that was on me. That was on me.
And we'll be back to wrap up this story and wrap up our pilot podcast. Appreciate everyone sticking around. So pancreatic cancer is what number most diagnosed cancers in the U.S.? So in other words, there's a 1, there's a 2, there's a 5, there's a 20. What number is pancreatic
I like this question.
cancer, Adrian?
Okay. I'll be thinking about that hard on the break.
You'll be thinking about that, and we'll be right back
on the
Cancer Sucks podcast show.
And we're back. Hello, everyone. All right. How about that trivia,
Adrian.
Jay?
Oh, yes. Trivia. This is trivia, or as I like to call it, Adrian's chance to redeem herself.
Yes.
As you may remember, she kind of misheard our first trivia question.
Oops, I got ahead of myself.
To speak a little clearer. So
no,
the next trivia question. No, this one will be really interesting. So we all know, unfortunately, there are a lot of different cancers. In terms of pancreatic cancer being diagnosed in the U.S., what number is it? There's the most diagnosed cancer, the second most, the third, the fourth, the 20th, the 50th. What number is pancreatic cancer? What is your guess?
In the U.S. All right.
In the U.S.
I am going to guess that pancreatic cancer is the 7th or 8th. Oh, 7th most common cancer diagnosis in the U.S.
You'd be
Dang.
wrong.
Okay, can I make one more guess? I'm going to make one more guess.
Yes, of course. You can.
I guess that it is the 13th most common.
You're just dancing around it. No, that's wrong also.
Dang.
You take one more guess. I gave you a hint. I said you were dancing around it.
Okay, fine. It's the 10th most common.
Ding, 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 ding.
No way.
Winner, chicken dinner. Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So it is interesting. So it's the 10th most diagnosed cancer in the U.S. And again, I think with earlier detection, I think with people getting in and getting these things done sooner, it will most likely move up that list because I think way more people have it. They just don't realize it. Now,
totally.
So the real bonus question here then is, what is the most diagnosed cancer in the US?
I would say lung cancer because I didn't realize how common lung cancer was until a friend of mine's wife, unfortunately, had it. So I would say lung.
You would be wrong. However, I'm going to add an asterisk to this. If we were looking at the number one diagnosed cancer in the world, you'd be correct. It is lung
okay.
cancer. And I have to say, I have no insight in this whatsoever, but I have to say that smoking in the U.S. has become far less PC than it used to be. So it doesn't surprise me that it's actually number 3 in the U.S. And it also doesn't surprise me, given the number of smokers in the world, that is number 1 worldwide. But actually, the number 1 and number 2 diagnosed cancers are sort of split between men and women, with breast cancer being number 1 and prostate cancer being number 2 for men. So breast cancer and prostate cancer. And again, I don't think there's any surprise there, given the awareness and the amount of money that everyone has done such a great job of creating awareness for those 2 types of cancers.
You're right about that, actually.
That we know more about it. You know, and I think that's a good thing.
I didn't think about that. It doesn't necessarily always mean the most common, kind of cancer. It's the most detected, most,
People
tested
are getting
for.
Checked now.
Yeah,
People,
I'm getting checked
women are going in during breast
every
cancer
year.
month and getting checked, and it's so important.
Totally. You're right.
So that's, again, there's a lot of good news here. You sometimes have to dig a little deeper, but there's a lot of good news as it relates to, where people are making progress currently on the cancer front. So, but good job on the trivia. You're fully redeemed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get one right one of these days. Can't wait. Cannot wait. Okay, so back to part 3 and the final part of your story, and to kind of recap, you had this diagnosis. You had to go immediately into chemo. You kind of knew the path forward, what it could look like, but you didn't know which path it would take. You knew that there's some chemo, there's some radiation, and there's the potential of a surgery that's very extensive, and you have to qualify. And even if you qualify, there's a lot of risks associated or a lot of ways in which it may not work. So I'm sure you're feeling just one foot in front of the other at this point, trying to cope and wait through all of that. I can't imagine how that all was feeling. And that leads you to getting the Whipple and actually having a successful Whipple procedure, which is very amazing and lucky. And, out of all those things all along that way that could have happened, I feel from my perspective as an outsider, like so much did go right. It was caught early. It was a small tumor on the side where it can be caught. It was able to be operated on. The operation was a success. Then on the flip side, you find out right when you're cancer-free, actually, no, you still have cancer, but it's a different cancer. It's prostate cancer. But the good news in that also being that out of all the types, it is slower. It's able to be monitored. It's kind of something you could put on the, back burner, so to speak, while you're really figuring out and making sure the pancreatic cancer is gone. Which leads us to part 3. And I'm sure you guys are not going to expect this curveball, but let's just get right into it. Do you think I summed it up all right?
Oh my gosh, I was going to say, wow, she's listening. She's really listening.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully everyone else is too.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that so much, Adrian. That really was a great recap. And, I just want to make sure that everyone's not missing any parts of this, because I learned so much through this process. I mean, that's really where I got my education.
Yeah,
and I'll be honest, as hard as the prostate diagnosis was, and it was really more difficult for me because it's what my father passed away of back in 2013 than it was more than anything else. That just, I've always felt like is going to be okay. And then I felt like, wow, I was successful with the pancreatic cancer. That was good as well. And so now we're at a situation where, gosh, let's say late summer 2024, so less than a year ago, and I'm going back in and having regular checkups. That's what you do because you're never fully out of this fight. And I will say the one kind of out there possibility with where I had my Whipple procedure was the location of my tumor was next to an artery. had not intertwined yet. A lot of times the artery and the tumor will intertwine, making the tumor inoperable. For me, it had not intertwined, but they were next to each other. So arteries are tricky. You know, you go into surgery and you start cutting too much of an artery away, you can really bleed out, essentially. I mean, you know, you got to be very, very, very careful when it relates to arteries. And so in July, you know, I'm getting my regular blood test done. And for pancreatic cancer, they have something called tumor markers. And what tumor markers are is there are markers in your body that the blood picks up on that are pancreatic cells. And so if your tumor markers are within a certain range, normal, nothing to worry about. If they start to get higher, it just means there could be a presence of pancreatic cancer cells. But then if they start to get even higher, it means there's probably a tumor that's involved.
Okay,
with that.
so the cells you're saying at that mid range where they're a little bit high could actually be like in your blood itself?
Correct. Or the blood picks up on them.
Right, right.
They're in the pancreas.
They're in the, I see, in the pancreas,
it's
and it's
specific
picking up
for
on them.
pancreas. Yeah, but
Got it.
they're,
And as
they're
they
being
get
picked up
higher,
on by the blood. Yes.
I see. Okay. And then as they get
Again,
higher, there's a chance that the tumor,
Right.
that a tumor is there again. Okay.
I'm sure there's doctors listening to this going, man, this guy's just totally slaughtering this whole thing. It's like,
No.
I'm
doing
describing it
great.
as I've best as it's best been told to me. So essentially, in layman's terms,
I
Right.
am the audience and I need layperson's terms.
I can't start going into monocytes and all these different blood terms that I've also learned along the way because my head just
Yeah.
goes at this
I left
point.
chemistry class in high school. No more of that.
Yeah. No, that was I was a communications major, for crying out loud. I don't think I ever made my way there unless I got lost, you know,
Yeah.
finding my way back to my
I
locker.
can agree. Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so they found these higher markers in your blood.
So they
and-
were a little high, but they weren't anything to worry about. Still, they were a little high. And so the doctor's like, well, I want to keep an eye on these. Let's do these a little more frequently than we've been, because they've been doing them about a month apart. And I was like, okay, again, didn't think too much about it. My weight had been kind of maintaining, so I hadn't been losing any weight or any indication of anything. But another month goes by and that number triples.
No.
That's not good. And so my doctor, my oncologist, confirmed my worst fears, which is you have a tumor that's regrowing. So we have a regrowth of a tumor in the same location of pancreatic cancer. So this is now probably October of last year when this happened. And so the doctor was still like, let's just kind of see where this goes. Well, I ended up starting to lose a lot of blood and they didn't know why. I was bleeding through my bowels. My numbers were lowering. And I found myself here about a week before Thanksgiving, and I actually fell 3 different times at home. I'd never fallen, by the way. I'd always had been sure-footed. But I would get so dizzy, I couldn't even describe it other than it was like being on an amusement park ride, like a tilt-a-whirl. Like I would get up and I couldn't walk more than 15 feet and I'd have to stop because I would get so dizzy. And so I finally went in back to City of Hope's emergency room and my blood numbers were very, very low. And they're like, you're going to need a blood transfusion. And so I ended up in the hospital with about 5 blood transfusions to get my numbers back up. They did a lot of testing. They couldn't figure out the source of the bleeding, which was very frustrating.
Yeah, that's
and it could have been
concerning.
something very small. It could have been, you know, it's almost like the best analogy I can say is, you know, if you've ever had your gums just bleed for no reason, sometimes that happens. It's kind of like that. So it's not like there's a big cut somewhere that you can see. It's just there's stress on your tissue and they bleed a little bit.
Yeah.
So I ended up in and out of the hospital between November and the 1st of January 5 times. I ended up with 20 blood transfusions and they still never figured out the source of the bleeding. But meanwhile, my tumor markers tripled again. And so my doctor said, look, we've got to do something. So a few things I found out. First of all, the first 4 rounds of chemo that I had, I can no longer have those chemos. They don't work anymore. So there are only 2 more chemos available for pancreatic cancer. And radiation. I'd had my max of radiation. However, City of Hope is one of those hospitals that has a brand new type of radiation they've been working on since about 2017 that delivers the radiation through an MRI. So if you can imagine, the radiation, instead of being 15 minutes, is actually an hour and a half, and you're inside an MRI tube for a little over an hour.
Wow.
And it's very measured, very calculated delivery of the radiation, because the challenge that you have with radiation in the area of your digestive system is you run the risk of it hurting your liver, your heart, your lungs, your stomach. They call it a lot of high value targets. You know, a lot of your major organs are right there, and they're all kind of stuffed together. So traditional radiation, they can't really give you that much because of the location. So this radiation lasts longer, but there's only 5 that you get. But it's done essentially when you're in an MRI. They literally put these glasses on you, and you have to breathe, and you have to make sure that this little square lines up with the other square, and only then does the radiation actually get delivered. And it gets delivered in higher doses, and then if your breathing goes off, it stops. So it's not delivering it where, because obviously when you breathe, your tumor moves, and that's the challenge they have, and you can't hold your breath forever. So so that was kind of step 1. And so we went through 5 rounds of that, and that was supposed to work for another couple of months. So we wrapped that up at the end of January. That probably worked efficiently till at least the end of, April, which is not that long ago. And then we started a couple of weeks ago, new rounds of chemo. Now, these 2 new rounds of chemo, I was warned, even though these 2 rounds of chemo are kind of less in terms of the dose, in terms of my original chemo, I was told this would hit me much harder because I'm not starting out this way now. Now I've been through all of this. I've had damage done through the other chemo. And so
that makes sense.
It hit me hard. So they started out with the initial new chemo drug, and I was just tired a lot, very nauseous a lot. Those things never really happened the last time, and a lot of it has to do with my blood levels being down. And then I've had to miss chemo a couple times because of the blood levels being down. And then they started this second drug. And Adrian, I want to tell you, so everything I explained up until this point, I had not lost a single strand of hair in my head.
Yep. He had a full, great silver fox set of hair.
They sat this new chemo in motion, and within 3 days, I did not have a single hair left. It came out that fast.
So fast.
Freaked me out, was coming out in giant chunks in the shower.
Wow.
I'm like, what is happening here? And so, unfortunately, the hair is out. The hair will eventually grow back once the chemo's done. But what I've learned are a few things here, and we'll wrap the story up. First of all, you're always in the fight with cancer. Don't care what kind of cancer you have.
Heck yes.
You're always in that fight. And in my case, now the cancer I have is inoperable because the tumors I have now are wrapped around an artery, and there's nothing they can do about it. They can't really do. There's not a Whipple 2, Return of the Whipple.
Wait, that needs to be a movie.
A sequel, unfortunately.
Whipple 2, Return of the Whipple. Wow.
Once you've had the Whipple, you've had the Whipple. So
you've had the Whipple, yeah.
There's really nothing else they can do other than hope that it shrinks. And we're still at that point where we're hopeful that it will shrink. And we don't fully know. The tumor markers had started going back down, but they have just recently started going back up, but mainly because I've not been consistently able to have the chemo because of my blood levels that have dropped. So we're working on getting all of that kind of back in motion the right way. We will be having my next round of chemo in a couple of weeks, and they're actually increasing the dosage, which I'm really curious to know how that one's going to go.
Yeah.
So
Oh man.
I may be kissing my eyebrows goodbye at that point.
I'll draw
see
you
how it
on some
goes.
new ones like mine.
That's
I'll
good.
give you some.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They
fill 'em
need
in.
that filter on here now.
No, you look beautiful with or without eyebrows.
Well, and listen, here's what I will say. I am very blessed every day. I have an amazing family. I have an amazing healthcare team. I have an amazing support group, an
Yeah.
amazing wife who is my day-to-day caregiver. I could not be more happy with the team I have around me, and I am thankful for each and every day. I'm thankful
Yeah.
that I'm getting to do this podcast because I really do think it can help a lot of people. And, I really appreciate everyone that's tuned in today because, again, everyone has a different journey. I just wanted to share my journey to know I understand some of these things. I really do. I've been there. And I understand when you think things are going to go one way and unfortunately they go another way. And when you are just exhausted in this fight and you realize, got to do this again, it's hard, but life is hard. And I've always found anything in life that's worth having is worth working hard for. And so I kind of maintain that. And again, I just feel very blessed. And I'm so thankful to have you here co-hosting this with me and having Parker here as our producer. It's such a great little friendly setup that we have here. And I really hope that
Yes.
we can build that community and bring them into, because there's real strength in that. And that's what I'm excited about, is what we can do. And then coming up in episodes, we're going to be talking to health caregivers. We're going to be talking to a lot of cancer survivors. We're going to be talking to people that are going through cancer for the first time, second time, third time, fourth time. Some warriors that have really done some amazing stuff. We're going to be talking to some celebrities, because the one thing about cancer is it doesn't care what race you are, what sexual preference you are, what profession you have, could care less. It hits everybody. And that's why it's such a terrible disease. And we've got to it's a disease that everyone should be on the lookout to eradicate, because it affects everyone in different ways. So I'm just really thankful to be here, Adrian, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this show. I can already tell that.
I'm so excited. I'm so thankful to be here too. I'm going to learn so much, and we're going to talk to so many amazing people. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for
Of
being
course.
willing to share all the nitty-gritty bits and pieces, because I know it's not an easy thing to go through for you, for your family, for everyone who knows you. And I think sharing it is really going to help a lot of people. So thank you for your willingness to do that. Yeah.
Well, thanks to all of you again for tuning in. By the way, where can they find us, Adrian?
Yeah, so we're on pretty much every social media, and most of the links are at Cancer Sucks Podcast, but you can find all the links in the show notes below wherever you're listening or watching. But specifically, I want to shout out the Instagram, because we have Parker and Jay over there working on the Instagram and really just giving like raw behind the scenes kind of diary entries, so to speak, with photos and just little snippets from Jay's like day-to-day updates. And so in between all the weekly episodes, you can really just get a feel for what's real and raw and going on in your life. So I really recommend going and following the Instagram account, which is at Cancer Sucks Podcast.
That concludes today's episode, you guys. Thanks again so much for listening, and subscribe to the show. We'll find you on all our other social platforms, and let's keep this conversation going. Thank you, Parker, our producer. Thank you, Jay, our beautiful, wonderful host, and we'll see you next time.
And just remember, cancer sucks, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
Cancer
Okay.
sucks.
All right.
I like
I
it.
like that. I like that. Okay, that's our new motto. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.